Hello, everyone, and welcome to our part 2 of Black Women in the Workplace. Today, we're talking about her health and wellness. And here with me, I have Victoria Davis, who is a doctoral candidate at a university in Virginia. I hope that is correct. Awesome. So you'll get a chance to get to know her in a few, but just to give you a quick recap and introduction about who we are and why we're doing this. So this is brought to you by Vocal Action LLC. We are a strategy consulting company that focuses on projects and businesses that are designed to uplift Black people and communities globally. And so a part of that is having conversations, right? Like we have Clubhouse, we have Instagram, we have Facebook, all of these things have some sort of conversational piece. And the idea is that if we have conversations, that we can learn from conversations and build businesses and practices and programs and projects that actually come out of some of the things that we talk about here today. So last week we were joined by Dr. Jackson, India Jackson, and we were joined by Kenya Goods, who we talked about Black women in labor. And so today we are going to continue that conversation, bring it from the history of Black women in labor to what does that mean in terms of how we show up in workplaces. So I'm really happy to have you, future Dr. Victoria Davis. Why don't you take a second to introduce yourself to those who are watching?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, first, Rashana, for having us. Excuse me. I'm so used to saying us because I just started a business. But for having me, I just want to say, too, what you do for the community is 110% amazing. We need more people who have the courage to not only start and have these conversations, but to make sure there is action after we have vocalized exactly what it is that we need and what, you know what I'm saying, where we're coming from. After we hear our voice, action is what sparks change. So like she said, my name is Victoria Davis. I am originally from California. I met Miss Rashana at Tuskegee University after I joined Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. I am now at Virginia State University, so I'm HBCU all day, getting my Ph.D. in clinical health psychology. I earned my master's in 2017 in clinical psychology, and we are just 1 year away. Just got the internship to get out the way, and we are done. We are at the finish line.
Yes, well, congratulations. Did you have an opportunity to watch last night? I do a weekly segment called Commencement on Historically Black Sense, which is a platform, a social media platform designed to uplift HBCUs and Black Greek letter organizations. And last night, I had Dr. Nardos King, who actually is a superintendent in Fairfax and got her PhD from Virginia State University and something related to higher education. I forget what she said, but it might be good if you know her. If you don't, for you all to connect.
Yes, absolutely. I need to watch it and then possibly connect with her because we, with the specific research that I do through my program, we're all about education. So we started off with this specifically STEM and getting African Americans into that STEM pipeline for the underrepresentation. And now we are just looking at it, just education overall for African Americans and what that looks like in these predominantly Black high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, and, the gateway into college. So I definitely need to reach out to her.
Yes, you definitely need to speak with her. And so, as I said, last week, we talked about the history of Black women in labor. We went from slavery all the way up until today. And so understanding that history, Victoria, is that what you want to be called? Victoria, Vicky?
Either or works for me.
Okay. Understanding that, Victoria, can you talk a little bit about some of the themes that come out of that shared history of Black women in labor, and then how that affects how we show up in the workplace?
Yeah, there's several themes, and they, range from positive things to negative things, just as with anything. And it's very interesting to me as I go into more spaces that are predominantly white, especially coming from two HBCUs, where I see, based on maybe someone's level of cultural identity, how proud they are to be Black, and how that correlates to exactly how they show up in the workplace. For someone who is probably who identifies more with being Black in a more positive sense, they may show up with a sense of pride that exudes through their cultural expressions, whether it's how they wear their hair, the clothes that they wear. They might be a little more colorful, and those are usually the ones who might be deemed as more aggressive because they're assertive. You know what I'm saying? They know how to speak up for themselves. They know how to advocate for themselves. And then on the other hand, you see individuals, as they're coming into their own enlightenment, who might be a little more shy. So they might be a little more passive in their communication with the authority figures and with other employees. They may make sure they stick to the status quo of what Europeans say is professional, is the standard. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't proud to be Black. I think it just sometimes comes down to being comfortable in your skin when you're around people who do not look like you. So it's definitely a difference.
Yeah, last week we talked about respectability politics, and particularly we talked about while we know that we are constantly progressing to be able to show up in all spaces as who we are authentically, whoever that is, right? Because even there's going to be people who just like to wear their hair a certain way, who do just like to speak a certain way. You know what I mean? Like that is just their style. That's who they are. And that doesn't make them any less Black at all. But we desire to have all of us, however you show up, to be welcomed, right, into any workplace. At the same time, as you said, like we understand also that there has been a use for respectability politics, right, in terms of us being able to progress in the workplace. And so one of the things that I remember when I started entering the workforce through internships, I always wore my hair straight. And part of that was because, as I said, I grew up in Boston. And so growing up in Boston, number one, when my hair was straight, I felt it was more manageable because I don't like to even now have to twist my hair and roll my hair often. I prefer to just wrap it down and go, right? And I actually don't have to do anything to my hair either now, right? But I choose to. But I know that I knew that if I went to a interview or even in the spaces that I was in working with white leadership, particularly in the court and judicial system, that if I had my hair like this, it would say something different to them than if I wore my hair straight. So like that's something that I learned and had to unlearn when I moved here to DC. I often tell this story that the first day when I moved to DC, I was looking for a job and I did it old school. I didn't really go online and, go through Indeed and all of that. I literally printed out my resumes and made a list of all the places that I thought I might want to work. And I conquered one quadrant in 2 days and the next quadrant in another 2 days. And I was on foot. And I remember going to a government agency and seeing a Black woman and multiple Black women who had their hair like in braids and who had their hair natural. And I assumed, I'm like, oh, they're probably like case managers, right? And something more of like on the entry level position. However, when I looked at the name plate on their doors, they were like program managers and directors. And I remember specifically calling my mom and being like, they got Black women down here and they're like, they wear their hair in braids to work. And not only do they wear their hair in braids, but like, they're like directors. Like, like they're heads of the whole agency. Like I was not used to that. So that has been something that has really helped me to embrace who I am naturally, being able to be in a city, that allows me to be able to do that and still move up, right? Because that is like the goal for people. How do you think hair, you talked about like clothing and things, how do you think hair speaks to our health and wellness as Black women?
Yeah, that is actually like a perfect example. And another thing that you mentioned with that is, like location. DC has a lot of Black people, a lot of Black representation in higher spaces. It's like, another Atlanta or, Houston or something where being Black isn't a shock to other people. You know what I'm saying? So spaces like that, I feel like are very, I would say, inviting and should be almost like selected by us, you know what I'm saying? Because they are spaces for us, if that makes sense. But hair it's one of those things, like as soon as you look at somebody, it's right here in the face, right? So there's so many judgments that we make from the shoulder up about somebody instantly. Even when me, as a psychologist, an incoming psychologist, like when I have clients and I'm dealing with my body scan, I'm looking at you from head to toe, toe to head. You know what I'm saying? Like, how are you presenting yourself today? And I think hair is one of those things. It's like that thin line between love and hate for us in our culture, because we have been taught from a young age, like it's important to make sure the edges are slicked down, that your hair is nice and together. Like one of my favorite lines in one of Beyonce's songs, I can't even think of the song, but she says, bump these laid edges, I'm gonna let them shrivel up. And I think that's like, when I heard that, I was like, yeah, let them shrivel up, because that's what they do. But for us in the workplace, whether it's deciding, am I going to wear my hair straight, or am I going to put my hair in some braids? Am I going to wear a twist out for an interview, or how I'm going to show up? I think that is directly connected to our well-being and how we feel about ourselves. I used to work in a lab at Virginia State, and it was based on hair. And I have a friend who is doing her dissertation in this. And one of the things that, she mentions is, the way you wear your hair is directly related to, your level of cultural identity. And that's not to say that if you do choose to wear weave and other forms of more European standard beauty hair, that you don't have a high level of cultural identity. It is just, if you have a preference for wearing your hair a certain way in spaces, if you are changing who you are to meet a standard, it is directly in line with your well-being and how you feel about yourself.
And I think that's the key too, that I want to just pull out from what you said, that it's as women, we are entitled to wear our hair however, whenever, whatever we want to do. Mm-hmm. But if your preference is based on anything other than you just want to wear your hair like that, if your preference is based on you feel like you will be looked at as more beautiful, if you feel like your natural hair is ugly, if you feel like you will be more accepted in the workplace, if you feel like you will be passed over for promotional opportunities, those things. So if your preference is based on anything other than that, then that is what Victoria is talking about.
Right. And two, it's not just about, wanting to look a certain way for other people, but it is how you feel when you wear your natural hair. Do you feel beautiful? Like, our hair grows to the sun. You know what I'm saying? We are a direct representation of the sun and all its beauty. And for us to feel like we have to constantly manipulate it for other people, It is a mental health concern at the end of the day, because you are changing your identity at the end of the day. We were blessed with hair that shapes and moves in so many different ways, and we have so much versatility with it. The versatility does not mean that we always have to have it in a weave. Like, wear your natural hair and feel good in it. When your hair is straight and you got it flat all the time, how are you going to receive signals from God? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a gateway, you know what I'm saying, to heaven. And it's just like, we don't need to keep covering it up with all these wigs and weaves. Why?
Okay, signal from God, signal from God.
Yeah, you see your antennas, and when they flat, how can you get it? How?
Speaking of versatility, I wanted to talk about, in terms of, last week we talked about the nurturer and how Black women are often seen as nurturing, and to like no limitation, right? Like, we are seen as the fixer. You want something, go to Black women. Movements, it ain't working out, call Black women. People are dying, call Black women. We need the vote, call Black women, right? It's like in the same.
But don't give them their credit.
Okay, that part, right?
Yeah.
And so I actually do want to talk about that whole cycle, because there is this cycle of that I see that even happens in the workplace of, being passed over, then being needed, so being uplifted, and then being pushed to the back, right? Or passed over again. And I specifically think about this song that I love and that I actually put on a t-shirt that Lauryn Hill wrote, or I don't know if she wrote it, but it's her song where she says, "Tell me who I have to be." It's X Factor, right? Tell me who I have to be to get some reciprocity. And so can you talk a little bit about that ideology that we have as Black women, that we are super women, like we have to fix everything? And I know that this happens in our home and we bring a lot of that into work. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then we'll get into the cycle that happens.
That always reminds me of that quote, "Mama's baby, daddy's maybe," where we always feel like we have to show up and not only show out, but be the one to like save the day. It's almost like, yes, it's nurturing, but it's more so like a savior complex. Like, I got to get in here and I got to get this done. I got to get it right so that I'm noticed, right? But also so that I know I did my part, that I left my mark. And I think too, that's something that we go in with as Black women into these spaces. Like, when I come into this workforce, oh, they're gonna know who I am. Like, I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna do this and do that. But it's like they already knew you were going to do that. So at what point do you set up healthy boundaries to ensure that you aren't being passed over, but then needed, passed over and then needed, passed over and then needed constantly over and over and over and over again? And then two, how long do you allow it to occur before you do say something, right? Or you choose not to say something because you don't want to be deemed as aggressive. You don't want to ruin your opportunities at, moving up. And I think that too, when you constantly go through that cycle, especially with the lack of awareness, it ends up turning into being one of those people where it's almost like you got like this double consciousness. Like, you're conforming constantly over and over and over again to these ideologies that weren't made for us. Because at the end of the day, let's keep it real. Europeans and Africans, we have a different worldview. One is collectivism. The other is man versus nature at the end of the day. So when we go into these spaces automatically wanting to make sure we are the one at the top, or it's all about me, let me make sure I do everything I can, in a sense, but I'm also breaking myself down at the same time, you're not operating from an African-centered worldview. And that is the first red flag and sign for having a mental disorder in these spaces.
Where does that come from?
The worldview?
not the worldview, but like where does that, you talked about like we move into a double consciousness, and I want you to explain that as well for people who are watching that may not know, but also where does that come from, right? Like
It
what?
all comes from slavery. And you know what I'm saying? It always, you know, you hate to have to connect everything back to slavery, but slavery was set up to have this long lasting effect. You know what I'm saying? If you are literally slaving at a job and not getting any recognition, is it not the same thing? If you are the one who is willing to bend over backwards and basically just get done up and run up in hopes to be the head housewoman, where does that come from? Especially if you're willing to tear other team members down, you're not willing to work well with others because you are just so willing to do whatever it takes to get to the top. It comes from slavery. Yeah. And that idea, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say when we said slavery, I said I feel like this episode of Blackish, right? Because we always laugh at Andre Johnson, who's the father character played by Anthony Anderson on Blackish, because every time he's in that room with his colleagues, he always says everything comes from slavery. And in our last conversation, I'm not sure if this was actually in the recording, it might have been part of the pre-conversation that I had with Kenya and Dr. Jackson, was, I was hesitant to say when we were defining the term Black, right? So we came to the consensus for this project. Black means to be a Black person in America. Okay, period. And I was nervous because I was saying, as we were having that conversation and talking about the difference, because there are a bunch of differences now at this point of how Black people came here, right?
Right.
And some of them are by choice. Other ones you might say were for survival, even though, it was not by slavery, right? But it was by choice. But for survival, which probably can then go back to maybe not American slavery, right? That definitely has its hands in when we talk about Black people being enslaved globally and colonialism and imperialism, right? And race and all of that just going back. So very similar system, or not similar, the same system, right? Has forced them to migrate now. And so, but when we speak about African Americans, sometimes I'm like, oh, I hate that it starts with slavery. But the truth is that one of the things that Kenya was really encouraging about what she said was like, but you have to call it and you have to say that. Because if you don't say it, then it almost even gives white people an opportunity to get off a little easier. But the truth is that we are still dealing with and coping with and releasing trauma. Okay. And I'm not sure that is a product of slavery, because it continues to happen today to us.
Right.
Like, think about now. Go ahead.
I have like some colleagues who are from Africa and in other places, and they talk about kind of like the culture shock when they get here. And sometimes I'm like, okay, but then sometimes I think about it and I'm like, well, there's slavery happening over there. And then two, I feel like sometimes like the choice to receive, like whether it's an education here or to come here, is also a byproduct of colonialism, because America is hyped up all over the world, right? So it's like, why is it? And it's because of slavery. It's because of the system that was built on the backs of our ancestors. Yeah. And when we constantly, dismiss it, or where it's not at the forefront, and I'm not saying you have to always think about this in all of your interactions with people who aren't of color, but it is something to, I feel like, keep at the forefront of your awareness. just because when it is there, you think about situations and you move a little bit differently. That's not to say you have to become angry in every situation that deals with Black people, that you feel like there is no justice. That is not to say that you feel like you are better than people who may not be as enlightened or quote unquote woke, whatever we call it nowadays. But it is just as you navigate and move through these spaces, when you understand the behaviors that not only you have taken on and that you have been taught, but that they also have taken on and been taught, you got to start moving a little differently.
Yeah. So can we? I want to talk about those behaviors and what it really does, because as I said in part one, this series, this converse series that I'm calling it, Black Women in the Workplace, is really something. It really comes from just my personal experience, and I'm 31 years old, and so I would say that I have a good breadth of work experience, but I know that and I acknowledge that there are Black women who have way more than I do, but it is unlearning, right? Because there are behaviors, like you said, that you do to try to mediate if you can't eliminate, right? Just I'm gonna just say the stress, because that's really what it is. Like, I think it's extra stress because, coming into living here in America and in our work environment, it's all about the hustle. And I take personal offense, right, to these memes that continue to talk about, if after the pandemic you did not start a business, or what to do with your STEMI, or we have the same 24 hours in a day. If you break it down like this, and that, you could do this, and that. And it's like, we really don't know what people are dealing with, right? And everyone is different. And so when you work in this capitalistic society, there's already a natural stress that comes with just having to work, right? There's already a stress that comes with having to labor just to make ends meet for you, not even to mention if you have a family, okay? Right? And if you want other things other than just like the basic necessities, which I would even say come at a higher cost than just the basic level of work. We know that people are underpaid and underwaged and undersalaried. So if you want more of that, there's already stress with that. So then on top of that, compounding that with, now I have to think about how I'm wearing my hair. Now I have to think about how I speak. Now I have to think about when I speak, right? Because there's things there's things that could come up in the office where it's like, you clearly know it's race. You clearly know it's racism, and it could be a microaggression. And it's not to say that every white leader does it purposely, but as you said, it's learned behaviors that I don't think they sometimes even realize that they perpetuate in the workspace, right? And we don't also understand how we are agents of that, of those actions in the workspace. And so then you're adding that because you don't want to, you don't want to come off as angry. You don't want to be fired. That's like probably number one, right? You don't want to be fired. You don't want to come off as angry. And ultimately, you're just trying to do the best you can. And so that level of stress and anxiety, I am not sure. And I definitely want to do the series with Black men, but other than Black men, I'm just really not sure that anyone could really fully understand what that does to our health and wellness. Can you explain what that does to our health and wellness?
So what that's called is intersectionality, where you are a part of two marginalized or more groups, so for us being Black and then being a female, and how that feels when it shows up in the workplace. Not only is there things out there that are fighting just for women in general, whether it's higher wages, getting fair treatment, sexual assault in the workplace, all these things that occur, and then you tack on the fact that we are Black, it's just, and everything that's happening in society. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't come up to me asking me to have the conversation about George Floyd today, please, just because I am the Black person in the workspace. But when it does come down to those behaviors, it's again having the thought of, you know, where we come from is the most important thing. You know, before we came here, we had everything. We had it going on. So a lot of times I'm just like, what would the ancestors do in this moment? You know what I'm saying? They would probably tell you off like Cicely Tyson in the most graceful way. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't take getting emotional and things of that nature. And then you just think about the process from slavery to now. So we have slavery, which is a whole bunch of trauma. We get freed, we still have no help, right? We're still experiencing more trauma now, though, because we're dealing with hangings and Jim Crow and KKK and everything else. So now we have more trauma. And then we have the civil rights movement, which is still more trauma even through this. And still we have no help. You know, and the time that we have been out of slavery versus the time we have been in slavery still does not compare. You know, and I don't know what it is. I think it's Sex in the City where they say it takes Carrie Bradshaw, I think that's the line that she said, like, how long does it take to get over an ex? It takes the time you were with them plus half of that. You know, so we haven't even had our time to get over what slavery has done. And our grandparents went through the Civil War. Like they were, you know what I'm saying? They were a part of that. And so I think when you just compile all of this on and you think about the level of stress that we are under just as Black people and then Black women and then being in these white spaces, it is so important to, one, of course, you figure out what works best for you. But if you are feeling this extra amount of stress, your well-being at the end of the day is worth more than anything else in the world. Like one of my best friends, her sister, she quit her job so that she can be home with her family instead of, you know, working that basically 9 to 9 every day just to put food on the table. Because again, we're taught this is the way we have to do things. And instead, she has literally found a way to make it work where now she is literally blossoming and growing into the person that she really wants to be. And she has her daughters being able to see that instead of passing down this idea, the only way to be successful is if I work hard and slave from all my life. And for some people, they like that. There are people who are naturally driven to do those types of things. And there are other people who are naturally driven to live life in a slower pace. And that's okay. You have to find what works for you. But if you know you are at a place in your workspace and you're fighting hard to be recognized, you've had these conversations with HR and things aren't getting done, things are dismissed over and over and over again, and you're constantly being singled out, you got to go. You got to go because it's not worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that you also, as people, we move in streams, right? So at one point in your life, you could be the go-getter. You know, I remember in college, okay, which doesn't feel like that was long ago, but apparently,
it wasn't, girl. It was right around the corner. I
right?
Feel like
you know, where I could go out all night and then I could wake up and go right to class and be fine and run on 3 hours of sleep. That does not work for me anymore, right? Right. And so when we talk about like balance, I am learning that you have to think about what is your balance today, right now, because I often feel that when I was working and going, and let me rephrase that. I still work. I have a 9 to 5 right now, plus this business. But when I was working in a method where, you know, I was just going, I'd be at work all night. Like it got to the point where nobody'd be surprised they called me at 9 o'clock and I was still at work, right? And that's too much. That in my mind, it was like, well, you know, at one point in my life, I could do this. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you're like justifying it because it's like, there's no reason why I can't do this because I know that I've done this before. When the truth of the matter is like, yes, you did that before, but you cannot do that now. And so building that balance really has to start with you, where you are able to say to yourself, hey, I cannot do this, right? And I cannot continue to go at this pace. And in order for me to be my healthiest self, I have to build my life off of where I am right now today.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's real, you know, and that's important. Like you said, we have streams, we ebb and flow as people, and I think within a lifetime you can have many callings, and it's important to understand that we have time. You know, time is another construct that we try to force ourselves and limit ourselves to. But it's like having babies. People feel like once you hit that 30 clock, oh my God, I'm not married yet. I gotta go. And it's not the truth. That's not the truth. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are people out here 40 years old having kids and just fine. Everything happens for a reason. All your steps are ordered divinely. And I feel like as long as you stay in tune with yourself and continuously going over what your needs are, because again, those change over time, you know what I'm saying, you're gonna be all right. But consistently showing up for somebody else and not yourself because of who you are, and your skin color, it's not okay. It's not okay, because impressing these people at the end of the day, I mean, it may get you some money in your pocket, but your fulfillment and the life that you have let pass you by, because you've allowed yourself to follow these ideologies, at the end of the day, it's kind of like,
Yeah, so I asked this question, and based on what we talked about in part 1 and where we're talking about here in part 2, you mentioned just all the different movements, and I think about those movements and how Black women have often been strong, if not lead characters, right? And not characters, strong leaders, just strong, in the movements, but have always had to sort of wait for the fulfillment of the reward, like as women. And so when we think about how that crosses into the workplace, do you think that we should trust the workplace as it is built up right now? And I know like trust is a word.
No, that's the problem. It's that I know I'm going to get it one day. I trust and believe. And then like too, we don't even have mentors in these workspaces that look like us. You know what I'm saying? And I have this conversation often with people, and I hate to say it, but at the end of the day, a lot of, can I say white people? Can we say that on here? A lot of white people, at the end of the day, they are going to choose their white privilege over the relationship that they may have with you. I think about like if I'm with the white person in the store and we're robbing the place, and the police comes over and asks, well, ma'am, is it her fault? Did she make you do that? You know what I'm saying? Like, and he's giving you that look like, say the right answer. What are you going to say? Are you going to say, no, we did this together? Or are you going to say, yeah, it was her because you don't want to go to jail? And if you do say, yes, it was her, and then y'all get into the interview room. I mean, yes, it was both of us, and then you get to the interview room and the story changes. What's going to happen? So I say no. And that's not to say that you can't trust white people or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. But I feel like if you can just lean on your own understanding and knowledge and not someone else's, then you'll be okay. Which will probably lead you to saying, I'm not going to continue to do this anymore. Because how long are you supposed to wait? Like, and I know that's probably different for a lot of people. But how long are you supposed to wait?
Yeah. I think too that crosses over into it's funny because I worked in both types of scenarios, right? I worked in scenarios where I've worked at predominantly white agencies, corporations, and that to me has been stressful, but almost like less stressful because I already know what to expect.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm already going in prepared and I don't expect anything different.
Yeah.
But what has been more difficult is actually working in some spaces, I don't want to say all of the spaces, where it's a predominantly Black group. Because we're all bringing in that, like we're all bringing our layers into the workplace at the same time. And I think that creates like something that can be a little more difficult because while yes, we want to be unified and we want to have, you know, yes, we want to be unified and we all want to like that collective work that you were talking about. There is this place of competition that happens. And some of it is, I mean, like you said, because we're bringing all of this there and we're all at the same time trying to survive. And so it is that double consciousness, it's that duality that can turn into something that is toxic where we're actually just we're just fighting each other. And I think that definitely goes back to slavery. So I'm not it's the same system that you're talking about that empowers white people to utilize their authority beyond what it takes just to be a leader in the workplace, is the same cause for why I think Black people can act a certain way to each other. And I think about this idea of imposter syndrome, right? Because I know that comes up often where, from my understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, but, imposter syndrome is an internal idea that you feel unqualified for the position or role or whatever that you've been asked to fill. And it doesn't have to be professionally. It can be you are now a wife and you don't feel qualified to be a wife. So you have imposter syndrome, which means that you are always trying to be whatever you think is required of this role that pulls you outside of who you are, that pulls you in, that then decreases your confidence because you're always chasing a thought, right? Versus just showing up as your full self and knowing that you are enough to be whatever you've been called or assigned to be. And so in the workplace, what I have found sometimes, right, is where you have this, where you're already coming, not you already are, but sometimes you are coming in to a position, which by the way, I just want to add this disclaimer. If Donald Trump could be the president of the United States of America, I don't think anyone should have imposter syndrome. Okay. I don't care if it's a job that you feel like is 2 and 5 grades above where you last were. Okay. If he can do that, you can do anything. Apply, boo, apply. Okay. And know that you have the skills to be there. But with that, right, sometimes you come into these situations where you don't feel like you have the skills, right? And so you are constantly trying to, as I said, meet whatever requirements there are. And you have people in the workplace that can be white, that also can be Black, that just make you feel like you're not there. So is there something, and I can see the trend, I can see that where Black women, we've been beaten down, like we really have, and not just professionally, but I think also we just been beaten down personally, and we are tired of that. And not just tired of that, we're just tired. We tired, okay? We Tamla man. Truth is, I'm tired, okay? And I think that when we come into the workplace, I think for some of us, there is like even a sense of just like brokenness that we're bringing to the workplace, that some of us, and I'm saying some of us, but I can also say that is something that I brought into the workplace, a sense of brokenness that probably has happened elsewhere, where you're trying to fill that with the affirmation of excelling in the workplace.
Yeah, so with that, so I don't know if have you heard of the Willie Lynch letter?
I have, but I heard, and you could correct me, is it, there's something that's like false about it, or is it true? What is the...
I feel like I don't know too much about it, but I do know, I feel like from what I've heard about it, when I've seen, it's pretty much explaining that if you can pin Black people against Black people, the white people will stay in a superior place. And so when we feel more comfortable in spaces because we know what to expect versus going into our own spaces and then feeling like there's like this need for like real true domination. One, that's just a spillover from what you probably didn't get when you were in the white space. And then two, again, it's like conforming again to that European standard where it is I against everybody else. And it is not that collective effort because we are subscribing to a worldview that was not created for us. And I even feel like, too, just as natural human beings, why do we feel the need to just want to dominate? Because because at the end of the day, like, we're animalistic, right, as people. So, when you like, a lot of times, and it's so crazy because I've been watching a lot of videos on Instagram. I follow this guy, his name's like Chakra Bars or something, but he's really into animals, and he's always showing these videos of animals that you would automatically deem as like just being super aggressive, like sharks, for instance. Like, there was a video where a lady, she went and she dived in and she noticed there was a hook in the shark's mouth. So like, she went up to the shark and she's petting the shark, and like the shark becomes very loving and he starts to like calm down. Because just like anybody, when you approach somebody not knowing what they're gonna do, you're instantly tensed up and you're like, okay, what is this person gonna do? You know what I'm saying? But then as you get to understand what this person's intentions, you can calm down a little bit, right? So I always feel like, just as natural human beings, why have we put ourselves into this position to feel like it needs to be world domination? It needs to be me against everybody else. Like, that is not a natural, it should not be, I guess, a natural instinct for us as human beings, on top of the fact of, it's like that it's easier to be upset and mad than it is to be positive and happy. That you have to preach to people. You can choose happiness. Like, you can really choose you can choose to learn from pain. You can either be wounded by pain, or you can choose to learn from pain. You know what I'm saying? You can become wise from pain. So I always just kind of look at things from that perspective. Like, why do we, and I don't necessarily have the answer to it besides it coming back to the European worldview, but why do we feel like we have to dominate so much, especially to the point where we're willing to hurt our own people and not work as a team, and we're really, we're willing to like cut and show out and not do what we're supposed to do for our neighbor at all. And I don't know, it takes a village. We say that it takes a village, but we don't act like that when we're subscribing to European standards.
Yeah, I find it interesting that, just like you said, there are a lot of things that happen personally that spill over into the workplace. And so even some of the things you're talking about just around dominance, just around, you're lacking something in one space and you are trying to get that in another space, right? Like that is the workspace. And I think that goes into that hustle mentality of like, I got to get it here because I'm not getting it somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And how you could be failing, somewhere else, and you go and you seek that same, like you seek that affirmation, you seek that comfort, you seek that validation in the workplace. And I think that that's probably where some of that need to dominate comes in, because you're not dominating somewhere else.
Yeah. And then too, like, are you really doing something that you enjoy and that you love, to even start to cultivate what health and wellness should look like in the workplace, and how it should spill over into your personal life, and how you take care of yourself at the end of the day. And race is like such a heavy issue because it has so many layers to it. And then too, just all of the historical events that have occurred and that are still occurring. I'm pretty sure some people are turning in their grave to know that they fought so hard to see that we are still going through the same things, from our brothers being locked up at a mass rate to people getting shot and killed in the street in their homes unarmed. There is a difference that is constantly drilled into our heads on a day-to-day basis, that already makes people who look like us feel inferior. And it's really heartbreaking. And two, like, I feel like one of the ways that they do it is to continue to push those emotional buttons. And I think awareness is key. Information is the way that you unlearn certain things. And also, too, like, as you are gaining this information, be willing to change your perspective. Be willing to say, you know what? Instead of, oh, I must be inferior because of this, and I'm pissed, now I'm mad, and I want to go out and fight. And instead think, why is it that they always picking at us? Like, what is it that you would tell your child who's getting bullied? If they bully you, it's because they like you or they want to beat you, right? So just understanding what that means, and not allowing it to, and of course it's going to make you emotional, but the emotional response is really where I feel like we can start to recognize our own power and to really start operating from our natural instincts and our natural desires versus what has been programmed for us to do. And I feel like I went off on a tangent, but
It's okay. When we talk about the emotional response, can you talk a little bit about emotions, and how they play a role, and who we as Black women show, and how we as Black women show up in the workplace?
Yeah. So even like, when you are confronted with an issue or altercation in the workplace, and it's another thing too, that we can be so quick to regulate ourselves in those moments where we become so passive and we dim our light and we like become very small, where we're just like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, yes, master. But then when we're in our real world, we're seeing these things and we always have our little think pieces and we ready to go off and go in on Betsy, Susie, and Lou, when it may not necessarily affect us. But emotional regulation is like, I feel like, is one of the number one keys to success. If you can regulate your emotions, no one can have power over you at the end of the day. Because what people often look for is to see, one, how far can I push this person? If I continue to treat her this way, what is the response that I'm going to get? Where does the weakness lie? But when you can regulate your emotions and not allow other people to always know what you are thinking and how you are feeling before you have processed it. Because it's important to, again, advocate for yourself and express yourself and to let people know if they have hurt your feelings or if they have offended you or disrespected you. But it is, did you process it before you opened your mouth? Did you process it before you decided to take the high road and not say anything because you were more worried about your job and your status in the workplace? So emotional regulation, I feel, is another thing that we can work on. And instead of allowing it to dim our light and to not allow us to use our voice and produce that action that is needed for that reciprocity in the workplace, we definitely should use it more so for getting what we want. Because it is okay. And when you do, I have seen the effects of being in the workplace as a Black person, being the only one sticking up for yourself and saying what you need. I have seen the positive effects of that, because at the end of the day, you are valuable. What you bring to the table is needed. And let's not forget that a lot of people do hire Black people to meet that status quo for quote unquote diversity. And I say use it to your advantage. Use it to your advantage and let them know that they're not going to walk all over you. No, you are not the token Black person. I'm actually the one who's going to show up and show out, and you need me because I do work hard. But with my hard work, it's going to come with some boundaries.
Yeah, and that's what I would say really is probably, and we're going to talk more about this in part 4 when we talk about self-accountability, is the need to set boundaries. Because that's critical. You know, it's one thing to have been pulled from a pool of candidates to have this job because you are qualified, you are going to work hard. It's another thing to overwork yourself and be used as a workhorse, right? In any type of environment. And when you talk about emotional regulation, the reason I was saying that it really is personal is because I find that, you know, in the things that I struggle with professionally are also things that I struggle with personally, right? So like, I am always the planner with my friends, and I enjoy being the planner. You know, that is a part of what I do. It's a part of what I love to do. But I always want to do everything. And a lot of that is hyper independence. And I say it's hyper independence because I'm not the person that's saying like, I've never been the person to say like, I don't need anybody, or, you know, in the dating where I never been the type to say I don't need a man, you know, but I behave as such, right? That I don't need anybody. And that comes from trauma of just being let down or not having my needs met. And so I bring that into the workplace, and I'm very aware of that, where I can take on too much, right? And it's because I'm taking on everything because I don't trust other people to do it. And it's like, it's not even in the sense of then you become something that you're even a micromanager. It's just that you're just a workhorse, right? Because nobody's doing nothing. But and you're overworked, and you can, you know, in the beginning, you know, I told myself, you know, that I'm doing all of these things because I know that I want to get all this experience because it will be helpful for, you know, my professional development and the things that I want to do, right? You tell yourself all those things, but you don't realize just how much of an emotional, physical, mental drain that really puts on your body. And so you begin to have these conversations. I remember I was fortunate enough to be chosen for a leadership group through my job. And through that, they give us a leadership coach. And I'm not even going to lie to you all. Those first couple sessions, I sat there and cried the entire time. Now, this is a leadership coach, okay? This is not my therapist, all right? This is a leadership coach, someone who is working with me to, make professional goals and meet those goals. Shauna, what is it that you see yourself doing in 5 years? That type of thing, right? But I'm literally crying because I literally cannot even see past what is going on right now, because that I just have so much going on right now. Like, that's my whole life, is what I'm doing here, that I have totally lost sight of my professional goals. Like, I totally lost sight even of this business, of vocal action, which is that is my heart and practice, right? Like, like that is what this is. And so I do know that as Black women, many of us bring similar things to the workplace that show up not just at work, but also show up in our personal lives. And so once I begin to make those connections, that it's not like, okay, Rashonda, you're this way with your friends, you're this way at work, because I also compartmentalize like all the different things in my life and the people that are associated with those things, right? But once I begin to really study that and say, no, I'm actually, for example, hyper independent, okay? And I realized that it might look differently with my friends. It might look differently with my family. It might look differently at work, but it all is the same thing. And that is unhealthy. And so once, you begin to do the work, and I am doing the work, to reduce that is the emotional regulation, which will allow me to show up at a workplace feeling confident, but also setting those boundaries to say, I'm not taking on all of these things, even though I could, but would I be happy, right? That's the question you asked earlier about, we make the choice to be happy. Would I be happy? Would I be healthy? That's the other question. And so that to me was that this experience, as I said, last year, this time, and I was looking at the date, actually it was March 26th. Last year, I made a decision that I had to move away from something that I really enjoyed doing, because I was not happy and I was not healthy. And that's healthy mentally. I was not healthy physically. I wasn't happy spiritually. And while I had asked for help, right, that help did not come. And that was that then re-emphasizes or like makes bigger. I'm not sure the word I'm trying to say, but it sadly affirms, right, what I was just explaining, what was my cause for hyperindependence, of being let down, of not having my needs met. So here I am asking for the help. Those things aren't met. So now I'm going right back into my not so great coping mechanism of I got to do it myself. And so that's something that I would say to Black women that are watching this program, as we're talking about all of these things and the different historical events, or even current events, right? Because you mentioned George Floyd, going into a workplace where they're not realizing that I need a second. Like I need a second. Like all of this is happening. Like you said, I'm Black. I'm a woman. And now I'm coming into a workspace, especially, and I'm saying especially, but if you work in the corporate world, please correct me in the comments if you like. But I feel like especially those of us that work in public service, where we're working for people many times that are disproportionately look like us. So when we're going to work at a job that we probably chose to bring some sort of justice and equity to something that is, unequal and unjust, to then have to be Black, be a woman, watching someone die. Okay, because I did not watch it. All right, I could not. I'm not. But watching someone die, and his last words calling out for his mother, right? Watching a woman be shot, and then not only be murdered in her own house, but for the bullets that went into the neighbor's apartment receive more justice than she has received, right? So when we're having all of these things, watching people terrorize okay, and bombard our capital and be escorted out of the building, it's even harder. And sometimes we need a second, and I think that workplaces have to acknowledge that. And I don't want to go too much into that because I know that's part 3, but workplaces have to do due diligence. And as we are talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, because now that is our new buzzword that has been around forever, but we are somehow pulling it together, to the forefront now. It's not just about the cultural competency trainings. It's not just about, the initiatives to improve race
And I
relations.
want to touch you right there for the people who are working, who are supervisors. Cultural competency training is not teaching about the Holocaust. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. Yes. Cultural competency training. And we already know like code words and buzzwords, right? So we know that even, civil rights started as Black rights. We know that cultural competency initially started to teach people about different cultures, specifically about Black people, and has evolved into everything that is cultural, right? Which is already a problem in itself for who we are, because that goes back to Black women and even just Black people, feeling dismissed. Like how, like that goes back to like, we're going to pass you over, but then we need you. So we're going to pull you back, but then we're going to pass you over again, right? Going back to that cycle. And so workplaces have to also understand that psychology as it relates to current social history, but also current issues that are affecting us, because that does affect how we show up in the workplace. Yeah, I might be a little agitated today, or especially in social service, if you're telling me this person cannot receive benefits, or if you're telling me that, this young person has to stay in a program longer than another young person, and I know that there are other young people who are not Black, who've been able to, leave and graduate in less time. Yeah, I might be a little more snappy, because going back to Tim LeMay, I'm tired. Truth is, I'm tired. And so those, I would say that I appreciate the history that is being taught when people are learning about structural racism and how do we dismantle that in the workplace. But we also have to know that it's compounded with structural racism that's happening right now, right? So it's literally it's not that Black people living, Black women right now are experiencing, we are experiencing vicarious trauma, but we're also experiencing like current trauma right now. It's not just like vicariously because we weren't slaves. It's literally current trauma right now. That's my tangent.
Right on, sister. You hit on a lot, and definitely, the education in the workplace, I know you said it's going to be the next part, but the education in the workplace is not up to us. It really isn't. Like, people who are not of color have put in a lot of work to create the structures, to continue these structures, these straight up savage inequalities at the end of the day, let's call them what they are, from these barbaric actions that are continual, like you said, raiding the Capitol, that's straight up barbaric, pooping in the halls, barbaric, kneeling on someone's neck, barbaric. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, these conversations don't need to be had by us. Y'all need to have them. Y'all need to educate yourselves on what has occurred. You need to recognize.
Y'all, I'm sorry, can you just clarify y'all for the viewers?
Oh, non people of color, non-Black people, white people. White people, y'all need to have these conversations with yourselves and amongst your own people in your spaces, instead of calling on the Black person to be the cultural expert for your lack of acknowledgement for what your ancestors have done. And just like you said, Rashana, the things that have occurred to us vicariously that we are feeling, is the same thing that's happening to y'all, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. You know, somebody clenching their purse when they walk past a black man, feeling like you need to walk around and follow me around the store. I was just in Michael's the other day, and the same lady asked me 3 times if I was okay, and I'm sitting here like, do I look like I'm perusing? I'm not even perusing. I'm looking at one section. You're constantly asking me if I'm okay. There's other people in the store you can go talk to. So there's no reason to be over here. But just, again, things like that, and being able to have your own conversations and understand where things are rooted in, where your thought processes are rooted in. It's just build your own awareness and stop leaning on us to do all the work, build your awareness, and then have to change the way we deliver the message in the workplace to make you comfortable, because that's another thing where we want to sit us down and have these conversations, but you don't want to be offended at the same time. And I mean, yeah, the next series I'm excited to listen to, the next part of this, because it takes a lot of accountability on white people to do what they need to do, that I feel like now we are seeing there is a need for. And I feel like now is the time to start feeling okay in these corporate spaces or wherever you work to say, I'm not the one. I'm not going to continue to work like this and act like this, especially if I'm not receiving any reciprocity for my work. And then again, like we talked about, identifying your needs, knowing that they change, being okay with the fact that they change. We have ebb and flow as people. We're dynamic as people. And making sure that when you show up, other people are showing up for you. And if that's not happening, being okay with taking another step. Because at the end of the day, there's 1,000 jobs out here that are hard to get. But you can do it because that's just who you are.
Yeah, I want to put a shameless plug in for Vocal Action. So as the future Victoria Davis said, we don't want you to depend on Black people every day, and especially those that's not their job to teach you. However, Vocal Action will come in and facilitate that conversation for your agency and for the members of your team. Know that we will hold you accountable, and the conversations will be uncomfortable, though, because we are only coming to you real. That is the only way that we can do that and really have that conversation. We cannot sugarcoat. And you will be called out because you have to face you have to face the truth, and it is a lot to unpack, right? So I know that we have trainings where we're unpacking racism and things like that, but know that that type of training is not something that happens in a 2 or 3 day training. It really is something that your agency or company has to be intentional about involving in your everyday operations, which means that sure, we may have a 2 or 3 day initial introduction, but then we have to have frequent check-ins, right? Because just like any project, right? So let's bring it back to project manager, because that is my training. I'm a project manager.
You better evaluate them interventions and programs.
Okay. Exactly, right, exactly. And I apply my project management skills to, as I said, projects, businesses, initiatives that will positively impact Black people communities globally. We have to have the evaluations. And so until we say that, are we successful in this? Right? And successful doesn't mean we step away and we never look at it again. It just means that we can then decide to report on it. We can decide to, go from, let's say, maybe monthly evaluations to, let's say, maybe we do annual evaluations, because it takes time for something to be a habit. And this is not like making your bed, and these examples that I give from my personal life. So it's not like making your bed. It's not like working out where you do it for 21 days and you developed a habit. This process is more like therapy, where you have to take time to actually go to the root, uproot all of that, which is its own time, and then replant some good seeds into some good soil and allow that to grow, to then you will be able to see the fruit of, and I hate saying this word because we just talked about Black women in labor, but you will be able to see the fruit of what you planted. How about that? So I want to thank Victoria Davis for coming on today to talk about her health and wellness. As we continue this Black Women in the Workplace series, you can read more about her in the description below, and feel free to connect with her outside of this. As she said, she is a doctoral candidate, and you can read more. We'll definitely make sure to add that to the description about, what your subject matter and field of study is. And thank you so much for participating.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So last question is, where can they find you if they would like to connect on social media?
Well, my personal page, yeah. So you can contact me. The best way to probably contact me is through my business page. I do own a handcrafted copper jewelry business. It's called The Righteous Tone. I have on some now. These are our mini ones. But it's _righteous tone. My email is therighteoustone@gmail.com, and the Facebook is also _righteous tone. And then from a community and business perspective, you can find me at the Black Village of RVA.
Yes. So thank you so much. If you all would like to connect with Vocal Action, you can always find us on all social media platforms at Vocal Action LLC. So thank you so much for having us. I cannot wait. And if you're watching, please remember to stay or put a pin, because we do have part 3 coming up next, when we have some dynamic people who have some dynamic women. And we're going to actually be talking about, as managers and agencies, what can they do to support her health and wellness. So stay tuned for the next episode in our Converse series. It was great having you, Victoria. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.